So I'm pretty sure we can all agree that 2018 was a huge year for superhero movies. I've talked about a lot of them here on the channel, but there's also some movies I've never got the chance to talk about at all. I thought a good way to end 2018 and start 2019 would be to rank all the films from last year against each other and try to determine which movies were the best and which ones were the worst. And keep in mind, these are my opinions, so if you feel differently, you're more than welcome to let me know how you feel in the comments down below. I'm gonna rank these films from what I consider to be the worst to what I consider to be the best, and at the end, I'll let you know which one of those was my favorite. Because there is a difference between what was my favorite and what I thought was the best comic book flick. There's gonna be some spoilers for some of these movies, so just be aware of that, but I will try to avoid talking about the major details. But for some flicks like Infinity War, it's kind of unavoidable. So without further ado, let's just get into this.
That wasn't even a crime, and you didn't save anything.
This guy thinks we didn't save anything. We saved room for design!
Oh boy, here we go. Teen Titans Go to the Movie. Okay, for starters, I'm not a fan of the TV show in any way, shape, or form. So going into this movie, I was pretty skeptical. And as skeptical and cynical as I was when I watched it, I was still mildly impressed by all the references to the greater DC continuity as a whole, and the overall faithfulness to continuity, and also as a commentary piece on superhero cinema, the movie does a pretty good job. The Marvel Universe references were surprising and pretty funny, especially the Stan Lee bits. I guess most of DC's heroes aren't quite recognizable enough for mainstream audiences to get their references yet, which is funny because even when they do reference DC movies, they kind of shit on them. This happens twice in the first 10 minutes of the movie alone.
Well, has there been a movie about you?
So many, and more to come.
It took a while, but yeah, I have my own now.
There was a Green Lantern movie, but we don't talk about that.
At least the folks at WB seem to be self-aware that there's a problem and that fans are looking down on them. I'm just happy to see an animated superhero movie back in the cinemas. Between this, Lego Batman, and Into the Spider-Verse, it's been a good few years for animated cape flicks. I just wish more superheroes got animated theatrical releases. Also, seeing Deadman make his theatrical debut was pretty nice for a fanboy like me. Okay, now let's tear into what I really dislike about this movie. The annoying f***ing music. I get that it's for kids, but oh my f***ing god. This is worse than Vanilla Ice's Go Ninja Go. Tara Strong rapping kinda sounds like she belongs in a late 90s, early 2000s semi-racist Mad TV skit.
Even his head to drop it on you even harder. There's no darker than me. I'm as dark as can be. Check it as the wrath Metreon does a zen. So
Don't interrupt, rude.
And then Beast Boy talks like that for just the whole rest of the movie.
this fool don't know whose we is.
Does he do that in the TV show too, or just here? Because I haven't seen much of Teen Titans Go. I just know that he never talked like that in the 2003 show. And besides, didn't Michael Bay get in trouble for having two Transformers act like that in one of his movies?
You forced me into that car, right? So
I think he's scared.
what are we gonna do with this shrimp taco?
Just bump a cap in his ass, throw him in the truck, and then nobody gonna know nothing, not me.
Yeah, not in my trunk.
But there are a lot of funny moments in this flick for sure. I think this one was my favorite. Funniest moment the whole movie. All in all, it's a pretty okay movie, but it kind of drags towards the end. It's okay, but I'm not sure it's anything I'd ever be interested in watching again, so I think I'd give it like a 6.5 out of 10. Okay, now here's a controversial one. Ant-Man and the Wasp. This movie gets a lot of flack and a lot of hate for being too formulaic or too convoluted, and I think a lot of those criticisms are valid, but the charismatic cast of characters and the comedic tone of the flick really helped me look past its flaws and enjoy it nonetheless. Controversial opinion? This was a great lighthearted romp that contrasts Marvel's other heavy hitters this year pretty well. Whereas Black Panther and Infinity War both carried a pretty heavy tone, and Venom was made by another company to appeal to another demographic altogether, Ant-Man and the Wasp was just another action-packed family fun movie. It really doesn't seem fair to compare it to the other Marvel movies from this year, because that feels like comparing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids to War of the Worlds and Creed. None of these are really like the others when it comes to the tones, themes, or messages, but they all exist in the same universe, so they get compared anyway. I mean, look at me. I'm comparing and contrasting them all right now. And like I said before, people really love to bash this flick, and I think there are definitely some valid issues and some valid criticisms there, but I still like the movie. I think the main issue with it is that the antagonist is completely soulless and unrelatable, with her only motivation being survival. Couple the weak antagonist with the fact that the plot kind of jumps all over the place, and it's easy to understand the disdain people have for this movie. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on this flick, check out my reflections video on it in the description down below, because I've spent too much time on this one already, and we've got to move on to the next movie. Well, this movie sure existed. First and foremost, the movie is just way too long. And secondly, I don't think that Black Manta even really needed to be in this movie. I think the only reason he was there was because he's basically Aquaman's Joker. And I don't think WB had any real faith that this movie would ever get a sequel, and I think that's why they kind of shoehorned him in there, just because they knew fans would be pissed off if they didn't. But that being said, I think Ocean Master made a lot of sense to be Arthur's first big villain, but Black Manta just felt way too shoehorned in and fan-servicey. If they had removed Black Manta entirely and saved him for a sequel instead, then maybe spent some more time with underdeveloped characters like Orm, then maybe the movie could have even shaved off like 10 or 15 minutes off of that titanic 2-hour, 20-minute runtime. I mean, seriously, this movie is just too long and it has so many pacing issues. Not to mention the poorly written dialogue at times. Aquaman is written and acts like a bargain bin Thor, and not even fun Thor from Thor Ragnarok. He acts like a dumb, boring, arrogant meathead Thor from Avengers and Dark World.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
That was the worst pep talk ever.
And that Pitbull cover of Africa is just a horrifying abomination to all of humanity and never should have existed in any timeline. But that being said, its existence here makes me believe that this really is the bad timeline after all. I mean, Weezer just made a really good cover of Africa anyway, so why couldn't they have just licensed it? Plus, Weird Al always makes everything better with his presence alone. Now, all of that being said, there are some upsides to the movie. I love the art direction, the costume design, and the general aesthetics of the underwater world and the creatures. The costumes for the soldiers were some of my favorites since the Sakura guards in Ragnarok last year. And Atlantis was just so beautiful. Plus the underwater creatures all looked pretty convincing and looked really cool as well. I didn't expect this movie to carry such a level of visual spectacle. And it really carries that over and doubles down on it in all of the action scenes. From the first fight scene in the film with Arthur's mom, I knew I was in for a real treat. James Wan fight scenes are always golden, so even if the script wasn't always there, the visual spectacle was always present. Most of the time anyway. If the script and pacing had been better, this movie would have been a lot higher up on the list, but all the flaws really hold it back, which is pretty sad, because I think this could have been a great film if it had just been done a little bit differently. But that being said, I think this is probably the second best movie in the DCEU, which is pretty sad, all things considered. Moving on.
We're gonna mix that with just another little dab of our Betty White. Now, let's just dance in a happy little sky. And remember, this is your world. You get to make and break the rules here.
Sweet baby Jesus.
Now, initially I wanted to make a video on Deadpool 2, but to be honest with you, after I saw the movie, I was just too disappointed. Don't get me wrong, it's a good movie and it's pretty funny, but after they fridged Vanessa in the first 15 minutes, I was just frustrated by the rest of the movie. There were a lot of funny jokes and good moments, and for what it's worth, I did really like Russell and Deadpool's interactions and story arc, but I wish the movie would have been more focused on that than making Deadpool needlessly depressed over a girlfriend who isn't gonna stay dead anyway. On another note, Zazie Beetz did an amazing job as Domino, and honestly, I was a little afraid this movie would be a backdoor X-Force pilot, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that it wasn't at all. And I actually kind of loved seeing the team get killed off immediately after the introductions. Hashtag Team Peter for life. This was a good movie, but it just wasn't as great as the first one. It kind of lacked the heart, and it was still pretty funny and worth a watch, but Maybe I just had my expectations up too much with this one.
Why the mask?
Ugly.
Why the jokes?
Insecure.
Why Princess Bride?
I'm a fan.
Why Celine Dion?
I'm a bigger fan.
Why the holidays?
Thought it'd be fun.
Why PG-13?
It's a family movie. Also money. Also Disney.
Why do you think audiences will be stupid enough to swallow this?
Not sure this level of curiosity is cute coming from a middle-aged man strapped to a bed against his will.
Want to untie me?
Not on your f***ing life.
No, please don't. Eddie, please.
Now, Venom was a real surprise for me. I expected it to be a complete dumpster fire disaster, but much to my surprise, I loved the flick. There are some weird scenes and some cringy moments, but overall, I was surprised to say that this was one of my favorite superhero flicks this year. Tom Hardy did a great job. And I thought Venom as a character was funny and incredibly charming. And I love that Tom Hardy portrayed the two characters differently and separately. I can't wait to see more of Venom. And you can hear more of what I thought about this flick in my reflections video in the description down below.
We are Venom. The Screen Slater interrupts this program for an important announcement.
I was really unsure of Incredibles 2 going into it, but by the end of the movie, I ended up loving it. I really like that the movie chose to make Elastigirl the point of view character as a contrast to Bob being the point of view character in the last flick.
Why would they change math? Math is math. Math is math.
I hope that means that the third part of the trilogy will focus on the kids, but never mind that, because it's not 2028 yet, and we have 10 years to speculate on the third movie. So let's just focus on the second movie for now. I didn't expect the movie to start immediately where the first one ended. And usually in Pixar sequels, there's some sort of time skip. And that's kind of what I expected here too. But honestly, the fact that you could watch this movie back to back with Incredibles 1 seamlessly is pretty neat, to be honest. I thought the whole plot was pretty well put together, and the Screenslaver's true identity was a great twist that I did not see coming. I love the world building of this movie, and I really hope we get to see a third Incredibles movie sometime soon, because I really fell in love with this movie. The movie has such a beautiful aesthetic, and all the characters are so charismatic and charming, and the world feels so alive and so well put together. It's just such a beautiful movie. I love the colors, and the action set pieces are amazing too.
Combustion imminent? What does that mean? Ah!
It means fire, Robert.
The motorcycle chase in particular was one of my favorite scenes. One thing that really impressed me was how the streets of the city feel alive and populated. In Incredibles 1, the streets looked so empty and devoid of life, and now over 10 years later, the cities are packed and densely populated, just like in real life. I love seeing art evolve with technology, and if 2 looks this much better than 1, I can only imagine how beautiful the third Incredibles movie will look. Now this is gonna seem like cheating, but honestly, I think Black Panther, Spider-Verse, and Infinity War should all be tied for number 1. The reason for this is something I mentioned previously in my video. These 3 films are so different from one another outside of being superhero movies. Spider-Verse is a bright and colorful animated family fun flick. Infinity War is a mega crossover team-up serial that's entire existence is predicated on the 18 movies before it. And finally, Black Panther serves as proof that superhero movies aren't growing stagnant as a genre, and that superhero movies still have room to grow and evolve. Black Panther serves as an example of what superhero movies could be and should aspire to be. I think of it in the same way as I do Dark Knight or Logan even. I enjoyed all 3 of these flicks just the same, and I don't think it's fair to compare and contrast them against each other when they all have different goals, demographics, and tones. And each one of them does what they set out to do great. That being said, let's talk about what they do great. This movie easily has the best animation and art direction of any animated film all year, which is saying a lot considering that this studio's last movie was the dumpster fire known as the Emoji Movie. I can't say enough about how visually appealing this movie is. It feels and looks like a comic book in all the best ways, and in a lot of ways kind of reminds me of the Ultimate Spider-Man video game. I think that this is easily the prettiest movie all year. And Miles is just such a great character, and I loved seeing him grow up. The conflicts between him, his father, and his uncle felt really sincere and relatable, and they were all executed incredibly well. There were some fun twists too, like Ock's surprise appearance and a few villains I didn't expect to show up here and there. But all of that being said, I didn't really like either iteration of Peter Parker. Peter kind of felt like how Lego Batman feels. He felt like a parody of the character they're trying to portray. And that being said, we got two completely opposite, exaggerated takes on the same character, which may have been purposeful, but in my opinion, both versions of Peter could have been done a little bit better. The good Spidey dies way too soon, before we can ever get a real attachment to him, and Peter B never really gives us a reason to get attached to him in the first place.
You have money, right? I'm not very liquid right now.
Peter B kind of feels like how Sonic the Hedgehog feels in any fan comic, where the author goes and creates his own character to beat up Sonic, just to show how cool his own character is. But that being said, another issue I had with the movie was that I felt like the other spiders didn't get near enough attention. I hated that Noir, Penny, and Spider-Ham all kind of just show up out of the blue, having somehow made their way to Aunt May's as well. The few moments that Noir and Spider-Ham get to shine are really fantastic, and Jonathan Mulaney does a phenomenal job as Spider-Ham, and they really couldn't have made a better pick. And Cage does a great job as Noir as well. But I feel like Gwen and Penny never really got a chance to shine like the others. Also, why did Penny get such a downgrade from her mech in the comics? Come on, SP//DR is pretty awesome. But maybe I'm just partial because I really dig that it's an Evangelion reference. So Black Panther was by far the most different and unique superhero flick this year. I love comic book movies that try to push what it means to be a comic book movie. Movies like Logan, Deadpool, The Dark Knight, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Because all of these movies are just so purposefully different than movies like Justice League, Spider-Man, or other by-the-numbers superhero blockbusters. And like that, Black Panther is pretty different too. This is the first Marvel movie to focus on a non-American that lives on the same planet as us. I love the social implications of this movie's message. This is a movie that really has something to say. A movie that tells us to be kinder to one another, and to take care of each other. I think Ryan Coogler wants us to come together instead of walling ourselves away from the outside world. This movie emphasizes building a stronger and more sustainable international community. It emphasizes helping the helpless and being kind to one another. There's not much I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said before. Ryan Coogler is just a phenomenal director, and I've been a fan of his ever since I saw Fruitvale Station in my film class 2 years ago. And same goes for Michael B. Jordan, who may very well be one of the best actors of our generation. This is a great movie, and I'd recommend it to anyone. It really surprised me, and I can't wait to see what comes next. So, it's not a stretch to say that by far, Infinity War was easily the most ambitious flick out of the bunch. It had the largest, most well-loved cast, an extremely competent crew of directors, experienced producers, and honestly, I don't think anything went wrong here. I thought the plot was extremely well executed, and considering adherence to source material, the scope of the plot, and the largeness of the MCU, this movie probably couldn't have been done better under any circumstances whatsoever. The movie actually managed to surprise everyone when the characters we expected to die ended up being the ones who lived, which I think was the best twist ever. I think Infinity War was brilliantly directed, had great acting, great cinematography, beautiful breathtaking CGI, and truly encapsulated everything a good superhero team-up crossover movie should. There you have it. Oh yeah, and despite the fact that those three were the ones that I thought were the best movies this year, my favorite movie this year was actually Venom, which I ended up giving number 5 on my list. I really enjoyed Venom a lot, and I thought Tom Hardy was awesome. And you should really check out my video on Venom if you want to see more Super Swim Team 7 content. I hope no one is too mad with the list, and if you are, be sure to leave me a rage comment down below. I really hope the New Year's movies will live up to 2018's, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. If you like the video, then, well, like it. And maybe subscribe too, and ring that notification bell. Jeez. I've been working on this video too long. It's too late. I'm going to bed, everyone. Thanks for checking out the video. I'll see you again soon.